Hey guys, it's Gina. I have had a couple of viewers ask me about this trimmer because you've heard me mention it in videos that I like it but I don't like it. And I want to just go through and tell you my pros and cons. You have to make a decision for yourself. There are definite positives about this trimmer, but for me there are definite negatives as well. So when I bought it, I understood that it would take up a lot of real estate. I mean, it has a cutting surface that extends past 13 inches, which is great, and it extends past 13 inches on both sides. So regardless of how long, you know, like Nancy said on her last video that the manufacturing strips for one of those collections she was using from My Mind's Eye, I'm pretty sure it was from My Mind's Eye, had a very long manufacturing strip, so it wasn't fitting. The paper wasn't fitting. She was mentioning crop bags and stuff, but there are also cutters that it would not fit in. But this fits easily, regardless of how long your paper is. It's got an over 12-inch reach, which is fantastic. So that's a pro. The pro also is, I mean, the thing that makes it a con is also a pro. It is very stable. It's a very you don't want to ever pick it up by this part here, this bar. But it's a very stable machine. It's very heavy. It's made out of, this part here is, there's a drawer underneath that's made out of plastic, but everything else is metal. The light is plastic, but everything on here, the cutting surface, your blade housing, everything like that is metal. The actual guard for the blade is plastic, but... So let's cut some paper, shall we? And I'll tell you, one of the things So I knew it was going to take up a lot of real estate in my scrap room, and that didn't bother me. I've had 12x12 printer, 12x12 cutters before, and that part didn't bother me, like that it was going to take up a lot of space. I knew that. I don't think I was expecting this to be as heavy as it is. It's very heavy, so it's hard to move around the craft space, and sometimes I like to just sit right here and have my my trimmer right here, but that doesn't work with this. This definitely has to have dedicated space in your scrap room, and it has to be easily accessible to you while you're working. So those are two things to consider before you go and spend the money on this. This was $100 before shipping, and I don't know how much shipping was, but it's an investment for this trimmer, and I can tell you that with making that investment, I'm not happy with it. So, I mean, does it cut well? I'm going to show you. There are just a few things that I just don't like about it. One is the heft. It's very heavy. So the thing that makes it reliable and you know, the thing that's going to make it last so long is, you know, that they use metal and all these sort of things. But it's also very heavy, so you can't take this to a crop. Well, you could, but you're going to need a rolling bag. So it's just very heavy and it's very unwieldy. Like, it's hard, you know, it doesn't have a handle. You can't pick it up by this thing. You have to pick it up with two hands. And you probably have to pick it up with two hands anyway because it's so heavy. There are a couple of things that I like about it. One, I like that it has a light, and I don't know that you're going to be able to see. You can kind of see when I turn it on and turn it off. If you look at my hand here, it has a light. And with my studio lights right now, you're not going to be able to see, I don't think. But as you light, yeah, I think you, well, with this bar in the way, you really can't see. But maybe if I turn it this way, maybe you can see. I don't know if you can see the lightness poking through that or not, but the light actually goes through the paper, and you can see exactly where you're going to cut, which is great. And when I'm only cutting a 2-inch piece of paper, a 3-inch piece of paper like this, it's fantastic, no problem. And then I line my cardstock up with my grid lines. I never use that bar because you never know how straight those things are. I always line it up with my grid lines. And right now, it's so high I can't see it. I can't really tell if it's lined up all the way. So I have to stand up to use this a lot of times, which is another reason why I don't like it. And the other thing I don't like about it is that it has to go this way. I can't turn it. It has to sit in this direction. So if you're left-handed, you might want to think about that too. Although if I was left-handed, I would prefer it over here because I cut this way. I don't cut this way, so it's kind of weird for me. But I'm going to line it up and I'm going to cut it. So what you do is you hold this blade. The blade pulls out like this. Well, you can't see it. The blade has a little bit of give here. You can see it's coming out. And you have to be careful down there because there's no protector underneath on that blade at all. So you want to be careful about that. So if you have little kids, that's another consideration. That blade is exposed on this outer edge here. There's a guard this way to protect your fingers, but no guard this way. So you line it up, you line your cardstock up with the little grid lines on the paper, and the grid lines are cut at every 1/4 inch, which is nice. And then you push that blade as close to that metal cutter strip as you can, and you pull it down, and you get a very nice, clean cut. I mean, gorgeous. The cutting on this is not the problem. What the issue is for me when you're cutting, I mean, I really like that it's backlit so you can see through the paper to know exactly where your cut's going to go. I like that the grid line is set up the way it is. What I don't like about it is there's no paper guide. Like, you have to hold it down with your hand. There's no paper guide to keep the paper from moving, and that's fine when you're cutting up 3 inches of paper, but when you're trying to cut up a full sheet of 12 by 12 cardstock, and you line it up with your grid like you're supposed to, so I've got it lined up here, not very well, here we go, lined up, so you want to look and make sure it's all lined up. So not only are you having to make sure that it's all lined up and it stays that way, you have to come down here and hold your paper, because if you don't, I'm going to use this on a layout I'm going to make right now, so I'm okay with cutting this. I want to cut this at, where's my, 7.5 inches. So I'm going to cut this at 7.5 inches. So I'm going to line it up right here. Yeah, 7.5 inches. So, what the problem is, so I've got it lined up against the grid lines. And once you line it up against the grid lines, you can tell whether your top part is straight or not. And this looks pretty good. It's a little off. But now I have to hold the paper. I have to figure out how to hold the paper. And because that part up there is not straight, it doesn't hold my papers so that I can line these up on the grid line here. I've got to hold this paper, because what happens is, okay, say I just hold it here. What happens is you don't get a nice clean cut here because it's not being held down tight. So you have to move your hand, so you have to hold this paper down tight here, and then here, and then here, all along as the blade cuts, because if not, the paper flips up and you don't get a full, nice, straight cut. So, like here, when I have a bigger piece of paper, but it's shorter, again, it's the same thing. But what happens is when you get to the bottom, see how this is flipping up here on the bottom? That makes it so your cut is not as straight. So you got to keep your hand. There's no paper guard. I wish that there was something I could slide my paper under. It would lock it in place, and then I could just cut it. It would be easy that way. So there's no guard. That upsets me. It seems to only like to cut in one direction. It will cut both ways, but it tends to work better for me if I cut this way. And what was the other thing? There was one other thing, but let me show you how well it will cut. And this is something that I've seen no other trimmer do. Like, look at this. It will cut this down. I mean, it cuts to the smallest. Come on. There you go. It cuts really small strips of paper off of there. So for that reason alone, I like it. But if it was a little lighter, it had a handle, so you could move it a little bit easier, and it had a paper guard, I think it would be a fantastic, perfect trimmer. I would give up even moving it and having it be unwieldy if it had a paper guard. I just, the thing that I don't like about it is that when I'm cutting, the ends of my paper, if I don't follow it all the way down, and sometimes when I'm trying to line up cuts and keep them lined up, I can't follow them all the way down. You could keep your other hand there, but then that gets dangerous, so you don't want to do that. So I just think it needs a paper guard, and if somebody could figure out how to put these metal strips on so that they're straight, so you could actually use this bar for a honest to goodness straight page, I think that a straight cut, that would be helpful as well. Now, about the unwieldiness of this trimmer, I did want to mention that I saw recently that they are now coming out with a trimmer that is made for traveling. So it is smaller, it's more compact than this, and it's made by the same company, Cutterpillar. And so there will be one coming out that is a little bit more, easily transported, if you will. The other thing that I really do like about this is this drawer here. I really like that there's stuff that I can keep. There's, you know, there's a well and stuff in there that I can keep stuff. So that's it. I mean, the thing about it is, like, I can accept all of the problems if it had a paper guard, like if it had a lock to hold the paper down. Because I feel like when, you know, I'm trying to do things with 3 hands, when I'm trying to make sure that it's lined up on this side, that I'm, you know, bringing the cut down, and that it's not flipping up on the bottom here. I think a paper guard would be a much more convenient option on this particular trimmer. So that is my review of the Cutterpillar Pro. If you have any specific questions, please give me a comment below and I will answer them. But I'm going to keep it and I'm not going to replace it, but it does take a little bit of getting used to and knowing that you have to hold that paper down all 12 inches. On my other trimmers, you know, they had locks that you could lock in place to make sure that your paper didn't move, and those worked out well. See, or they just had this handle that you held down and then it held your paper all the way. So my friend was scrapping here last night. So it just held your paper in place so you could do, you know, what you needed to do on those sort of, and then this I could just throw all over my desk, but I constantly lost it. So maybe this is a step up, you know. So I wouldn't say don't buy it. If you have dedicated space, you don't need to move your trimmer around. If you stand up and scrap, it's great. I mean, if you stood up and scrapped, I don't. So it makes it a little hard to see past those, you know, if I put my paper down here, it makes it a little hard to see where I am on the cutter. But if you stand up, if you have dedicated space and you don't mind the weight to it, and then you are, you know, you understand that you've got to hold that paper down because there's nothing to hold that paper down, then I think that, you know, it would be a good buy for you. If you want something light and easily transportable, this is not the trimmer for you. Although I would recommend going and looking at the portable one that they're coming out with to see if that more fits your needs. And if you need a paper guard, like I keep telling you, I have neuropathies in my fingers. It's very hard sometimes, especially when my fingers are cold, to keep them steady. And this is the other reason why you see that I flex them all the time. But holding that paper down gets a little bit dicey when I'm trying to make sure it's lined up on this side, cutting with this side, and then trying to make sure that the end of that paper doesn't flip up and give me a cut that's not straight. So those are the pros and cons as I see them. I mean, it does have a gorgeous, it makes very, very smooth cuts, and I just wish the ruler was straight, that it had a paper guard, and that maybe it was a little bit lighter because it's a very, very heavy machine. So like I said, if you have any questions, leave them below. I'll do my best to answer them as specifically as possible, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.